Hello, everyone. My name is Zishan Kadar, and I'm a project manager at the National Collaborating Center for Infectious Diseases. So the topic for today's presentation is about NCCID's new initiative, A Call to Action, Pharmaceutical Disposal in the Context of Antimicrobial Resistance in Canada. Here, I would like to acknowledge that NCCID is located on Treaty 1 territory, the traditional territory of Anishinaabe, Cree, Oji-Cree, Dakota, and Dani peoples, and the homeland of Métis Nation. So just to give you an outline to our audience of what we will be discussing for next 15 minutes, we will begin with the background and rationale of the project. Then we'll talk about the aim and objectives of the project. And further, we'll provide the type of review methodology that was conducted. And then further, I will discuss with you some of the key outcomes of the project. And finally, I will touch base the conclusion and limitations of this study. So why antimicrobial resistance is so critical? Because it leads to 700,000 mortality annually worldwide and is estimated to cause 10 million deaths annually in next 30 years. Here in this country, about 20,000 hospitalized patients develop a drug-resistant infection estimated to about 50 million in direct costs. As per Canadian Antimicrobial Resistance Surveillance System, CARS 2016 report mostly antibiotics are prescribed in the community, about 92%, and the remaining 8% in animals. About 1 million kilogram of antibiotics was used in animals, bulk of it, 99%, in food-producing animals such as dairy and poultry, and the rest was used in companion animals. Canada ranks 4th highest among the OECD countries, which is the Organization for Economic Cooperation and Development, after France, New Zealand, and Australia in the consumption of antibiotics, which is about 2 million each year. The United Nations Environment Report 2017 indicated that discharge of drugs and chemicals has direct linkage with growing issue of AMR. It has also been reported that 40% Canadian dispose of unused or expired drugs either through the drain or via garbage, which led to this study. So the focus of our study is to understand how pharmaceuticals, especially antibiotics, influence AMR. What is the scope of practice of pharmaceutical disposal programs across the country? And finally, what are the best practice models that are adaptable to Canadian context? So the main objective of this study was to summarize the available evidence on the nature and extent of antimicrobial residues in the Canadian environment. Secondly, to identify and compare regulatory structures, guidelines, and programs for antimicrobial disposal across the country. And thirdly, to explore systems and structures in other OECD countries, and to identify promising practices for pharma disposal that could be adapted to Canadian context. So the review methodology, our three-pronged review methodology was adopted for this study. We began by looking into the peer-reviewed literature published in Canada from University of Manitoba database, PubMed, Sinhal, EBSCOhost, Medline Ovid, ProQuest, and Web of Science, with MASH terms, pharmaceutical disposal in Canada, drugs disposal system in Canada, and disposal mechanism of pharmaceutical in Canada, published before July 30th, 2019. The second arm of the study looked into the documents published by the World Health Organization, the European Union, and the OECD countries. Also, an open search with no country limitation was performed on PubMed, Sinhal, EBSCOhost, Medline Ovid, and ProQuest. Full text published between 2015 to 2019 were reviewed. The third approach was to conduct gray literature search, that is newspaper articles and magazines published in Canada addressing the effect of pharma disposal. The government website, such as Statistics Canada, Health Canada, and Environment Canada, were searched for government reports and existing guidelines. Lastly, we also looked into the national, provincial, and territorial agencies such as the National Association of Pharmacy Regulatory Authority, Health Product Stewardship Association, and ISMP, which is the Institute for Safe Medication Practices, Sky-High, and CADET. Out of 119 reviewed records, 102 deemed relevant for our study. It has been commonly observed that pharmaceutical metabolites are present abundantly in our environment. More than 3,000 compounds are used as pharmaceutical from 24 different therapeutic classes, with antibiotics being among the most commonly consumed agents. According to Water Quality Research Journal of Canada, traces of pharmaceuticals, including triclosan, which is an antibacterial agent commonly present in soap and dish detergents, were found in 15 southern Ontario cities. This agent was also found in groundwater in Ontario due to septic system wastewater seeping into the surface. The 16-month study conducted by Ontario Ministry of Environment detected 25 antibiotic compounds in 17 different water systems, river, lakes, and groundwater. So what are the effects? These antibiotics have lethal effects on marine life. A study conducted in Lake near Kenora, Ontario, found that erythromycin as low as 1 microgram per liter was not only harmful for aquatic bacterial production, but also changed the composition and structure of attached microbial biofilm communities found in the lake. Erythromycin and other macrolide antibiotics also found to disrupt the transcription and or translation process in the photosynthetic chloroplast and inhibit protein synthesis of cyanobacteria and green algae. Another type of antibiotic, that is trimethoprim, also pose a risk to aquatic plant in Wascana Creek by interfering with the synthesis of folate, a vitamin needed for photorespiration. In addition, this study highlighted that sulfamethoxazole found in the lake could affect phytoplankton in the creek, and sulfonamide, a bacteriostatic antibiotic, limit metabolic pathways in bacteria and in plants. Talking about the legislative work in Canada on this topic, the paradigm of legal framework started in 1992 when the Canadian Council of Ministers of the Environment developed the national standard guidelines for the program of biomedical waste in the environment to streamline the different waste management and disposal practices among provinces and territories. This was followed by CPHA, which is the Canadian Environment Protection Act, which is the principal federal law that safeguards the environment and human health and is mutually regulated by Environment Canada and Health Canada in 1999. Under CPHA, Environment and Natural Resource Canada has developed the National Substances Program, which administers the new substances notification regulation, chemical and polymer, and the new substances notification regulation organisms. A couple of years back in 2018, the annual report by Environment Climate Change Canada on CPHA was released, which is the latest document discussing research conducted on the occurrence, fate, and ecotoxicity of specific pharmaceuticals in the Canadian wastewater treatment systems, along with the development of analytical method for the identification of degraded pharmaceuticals in surface waters. The Health Canada Directorate of Controlled Substances has also released guidance document for pharmacists, practitioners, and person in charge of hospitals regarding handling and destruction of unserviceable stock containing narcotics, controlled drugs, or targeted substances. The guidance document also include instructions for the handling and destruction of post-consumer returns containing controlled substances. Now this slide will show you how the structure across provinces and territories in Canada lays out. Only British Columbia, Manitoba, Ontario, New Brunswick, Prince Edward Island has a regulated program for disposal of pharmaceutical waste. This slide will show you the funding mechanism, nature of participation, and the collector and disposal organization across the different provinces and territories. Again, as we discussed earlier, British Columbia, Manitoba, Ontario, and New Brunswick, and Prince Edward Island are the only provinces which they have regulated programs for disposal of pharmaceutical. So this is the list of major non-governmental stakeholders which plays a role in disposal of pharmaceuticals across Canada, which include Health Product Stewardship Association, ISMP, which is the Institute for Safe Medication Practices, NAPRA, which is the National Association of Pharmacy Regulatory Authorities, CADID, which is the Canadian Agency for Drugs and Technologies in Health, and Optimal Medication Return Program based on extended producer responsibility. Now, this slide will provide you an international context with some of the major OECD countries for pharmaceutical disposal and the funding mechanism they have, which include Sweden, Portugal, France. We looked into Hungary, Australia, New Zealand, US, and finally Canada. Here, we show you the example from two OECD countries, which is France and Sweden. Sweden's National Pharmaceutical Disposal Program as exemplars for Canada. Sweden's program is government funded, whereas in France, pharmaceutical company is responsible for bearing all the expenses. In France, the program is run by a non-for-profit eco-organization, which is called the Cyclamed, which is responsible for operating the National Medication Take-Back Program. Whereas in Sweden, Apoteket is a non-for-profit in Sweden, which is a pharmacy chain and state-owned monopoly. Okay, so the role of prescribers and drug experts is very crucial. Literature indicated that analgesics and antibiotics are commonly prescribed for longer than recommended in this country. Pharmacists can play a major role in advocating for the return of unused pharmaceutical, adapting tighter control on dispensing and alteration of medication, and the growing number of auto refills involved. It is also a shared responsibility of prescribers and drug experts, which are pharmacists, to educate masses about safe and proper disposal strategies. Pharmacies should consider documenting the volume of waste to enhance surveillance and gather support to cover the cost of pharmaceutical waste disposal, while educating policymakers about the importance of formal medication return program in preventing environmental pharmaceutical pollution. So in conclusion, we can say that currently Canada lacks a national guideline or program for safe disposal of unused or expired medicines, such as those implemented in the Scandinavian country region, Australia, and other OECD countries. Sweden and Australia have a good monitoring process with comprehensive data. They have invested a lot of effort in awareness building campaign for consumers and health professionals. Their surveillance system show promising diversion rates for household pharmaceutical waste from garbage, toilet, and sinks. Lastly, in Canada, further harmonization across different programs and adopting best practices from jurisdictions can have fruitful outcomes. Limitations of this study. This review lacks a viewpoint from major stakeholders who are policy drivers in the Canadian system. For this review, only articles published in English and full text assessed via the University of Manitoba website were retrieved and reviewed, which may have restricted our scope. though a systematic process was followed in search strategy. However, this is not a systematic review, so lacks the rigor of systematic review in the form of meta-analysis. And also another industry such as agriculture and veterinary aspect is not reviewed in this analysis. So this is a graphical representation which depicts the key elements for best practice model in pharmaceutical disposal identified by this review, which include prescriber, dispenser, and patient engagement and education strategy, medication return program with federal, provincial, and territorial legislation on medication return program initiative encompassing all stakeholders from the community, um, uh, is huge. Then we have the extended producer responsibility for medication return program, and then constant pharmaceutical risk assessment from cradle to grave approach, ensuring environmentally safe degradation of these pharmaceutical products is another aspect to consider, um, and also adapting to alternative pharmaceutical substances with least bioaccumulative effect is the last point that was collected through this review.